Oh, wow. Wow. What a good light-hearted way to start, Parkwood. Thank you for tuning in. This is another episode of Live with Pastor Jeff. So, Pastor Jeff, thank you for joining.
Yes, sir.
And Pastor Jeff, let's cut to the chase. What are we going to be talking about tonight?
Well, the question everybody's asking, when are we going to gather again, specifically as a church? We're going to talk about the aspects of that, the governor's new order, just multiple things before us.
Sure.
This, quite frankly, is going to be more informational tonight, a little more serious tonight. We wanted to have a little laugh here at the beginning as we get started. So we want to devote time to how we're going to do this.
Right. So in light of the topic at hand, we would ask you to submit your questions, but understand that we will be limiting our answers to the topic at hand. So for those of you who've already submitted other questions, we'll hold those either for another time, or if you put your name on them, we'd be glad to reach out to you and get those questions answered. So Pastor Jeff, we're going to talk through our mitigation plan.
Right.
So the first part of the mitigation protocol would be registration and entry for services. So let's start here on a high note. What's got you encouraged?
Yeah, the really encouraging thing is that 1,300 people plus have said they want to return to worship. So brothers and sisters, that is so encouraging, such a blessing, but a little bit overwhelming. Sure. I mean, we really were not expecting those kind of numbers to come in, so that has added to how we approach mitigation. There's still some unanswered questions. So I'll go ahead and say this from the onset. For those of you sitting waiting like we're baiting you, we're not going to give you a date tonight, and I'll explain why as we move on, but I can tell you the plans that we have put in place in order to try to accommodate that kind of number.
Right. So in light of thinking through 1,300 people, how do we do this? The first step would be registration. So,
Yep.
Pastor, would you mind walking through a little bit what that registration process could look like?
Yeah, so at this point in time, because of so many of our members, this will be handled internally. Email communication will go out to the church. If there are people who don't have email, and we know that, they can contact us specifically, and someone from the church can do this for them Monday through Thursday. Someone's here in the office to do it. So you'll sign up for a specific service. There'll be multiple services made available. We'll set a max capacity at each service of 250 so we can do social distancing. You'll register each week as long as this is going on. So you can't register for service, and that's going to be your service. The elders, staff, deacons, they will only register for the service where they're not serving going forward. So wanting you to sign up.
Yeah. So be on the look for that when the announcement comes. So then what do we need to know about actually entering before we enter?
Yes. So the services are going to be, the goal is an hour, so service there'll be an hour between them. So you don't need to be here earlier than 30 minutes prior, probably 20 minutes prior, and we'll talk about why that's important in a few moments. You'll move from your vehicle to an area to where multiple things are going to happen. We'll let you know that you've registered. If that service is not full, somebody could walk up and register at that moment. If it is full, we will give them an opportunity to come at another time or wait to make sure that the service is, in fact, people are going to show up. At that point, you'll get a temperature check. And I know people are already asking, do I have to do that? If you want to come, you do. This is for your protection and our protection.
Right.
So let me say this from the onset. Folks, the most counterproductive thing we could do is allow COVID to spread while we're together.
Right.
So if I unknowingly had a temperature, I want to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, me too.
So if you had it, or if a member of your household had it, your whole household will be asked not to attend that day.
Right.
So I know there's going to be a lot of discussion about that, but we're going to hold to that. That is nothing. No one's forcing us to do that. That is self-imposed on our part. You'll be asked diagnostic questions. You'll check in, as we said. You'll be given a mask if you don't have one, and you'll be expected to wear that while you are in the gathering.
Right. So you put the mask on, and then last thing, you put on some hand sanitizer. So
Yep.
so moving forward, I'm checked in now. I've got my mask on. I'm sanitized. I'm good to go. So what's going to happen from there for me to go through the lobby and then into a seat?
So every door will be open. You won't touch anything. You'll go in. There'll be guided ways for you. If you come in from the east, you'll sit on the east side, either downstairs or balcony. If you come in the west, you'll sit on the west side or up in the balcony on the west side. You'll make your way in. I want to say this just as a side note. If you come in from the east, please use the restroom in the kids area before you enter.
Right.
Because we don't want cross traffic in the lobby. The lobby is going to be the place where we could spread. That's going to be where we can get on top of each other. So we want people to flow through the lobby in and take a seat. So interns have put together a little video just to kind of give you visually what's going to happen here once you come in. The registration part, we don't have all that mapped out. So you're flowing inside. You're going to be spaced out because the registration temperature tech, that'll help account for how you're spaced out coming into the worship center. Once you go in, you can see, I don't know how much you can tell, but the chairs are 6 feet apart by rows. They are not 6 feet apart. They're still lined up. So watch what happens. They come in, you have a seat, you leave 3 seats between households. So that allows 6 feet between you. So a family, a household, or those that you're normally with, you'll sit down together. When it's time to exit, once you are dismissed, you will have to flow out of the lobby and out of the building. You'll be spaced out in how you're dismissed and how you do that. So you're making your way out of the worship center area and in toward the parking lot. Now, this is showing just the east side at this moment. This will be happening on both sides. You'll notice the orange barrels there. Once you pass the orange barrels into the parking lot, then how you relate to each other there will be between how families do it. But please know this, you're still on our campus and you still need to be as careful as possible when you're doing that. So let me just make a comment about the mask while you're inside. So Pastor Chad read an article today. And if you've ever sat on the front row when I'm preaching, you know this. When you're singing, you can spread saliva 14 feet.
Wow.
All right? And I've spit on some people in the front row before. All right? So we've got social distance front row. That's why you got to wear a mask. If we're going to sing, people are going to have a mask on so that we are protecting each other, that we're not getting on top of each other. Now, know this. I'm going to wear a mask while I'm in the congregation. When I go up, I'll take it off to preach because it's hard to breathe. And I don't want to pass out while I'm preaching.
We don't want you to do that either.
Yeah, but I'll put it back on when I leave.
Right. We definitely understand it's not preferable to wear a mask while you're in there seeing one another, but this is the decision of the elders and church leadership.
That's right.
So, okay, so we preluded a little bit. So once you're done preaching, and you're sending the congregation, what do you need from me as a church member?
Need you to cooperate.
Yeah.
That's the main issue. Cooperate. We want to get you out as safely as possible and as orderly as possible. Once you leave, once everybody's out of the building, every chair will be sanitized. We're using a spray solution. Every chair will be sanitized. All hard surfaces will be sanitized. Every bathroom will be sanitized. Every entryway will be sanitized. Even though those doors were opened, they will still be sanitized for the next group of people who are coming in.
Very good, very good. So there's a lot of people already asking. People are going to keep asking. When is the first worship service? You've already said we're not going to set a date,
right?
But I'm asking you the question.
Right. So here's why there's no date today. The first reason is the number of people who've responded. We had not fully prepared for that. So like we were thinking 2 services, then we thought 4 services, and then now we're looking at 5 or 6 services, and we've got to count the cost of all of that and how that can be accomplished. We have to make sure every mitigation measure is in place. So some of the things that we have ordered to accomplish the things that are written there, we do not yet have. So until we have them, so like one of them, we're supposed to be here Friday, then we got an email today, it's not going to be here till next Wednesday. So until we have those things, we can't set a date.
Sure.
The third thing is the legal ramifications that are involved with this, and we're trying to be as careful as possible with that and how we proceed forward. Now, you said Sunday, I can hear the question, Pastor, we must obey God rather than men. Yes, but obeying God rather than men in this culture has legal ramifications. We want to understand what every one of those are, and that we want to make circumspect movement going forward. Then, yesterday, we get a new order, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, he says it's coming on Friday, right? And then
it starts Friday. Yeah.
And then we begin to read the statement of the order today. So how should we understand the order? How are we going to move forward with this new order from the governor?
Yeah, so I don't want to bore you, brothers and sisters, but likely if you've not opened the order and read it, you've not heard this on the media. So I am under the prohibition mass gatherings. Mass gathering means an event or convening that brings together more than 10 persons at the same time in a single space, such as an auditorium, stadium, arena, conference room, meeting hall, or any other confined indoor or outdoor space. This includes parades, fairs, and festivals. Now listen very careful to this next sentence. Mass gatherings do not include gatherings for health and safety, to look for and obtain goods and services, for work, for worship, or the exercise of First Amendment rights, or for the receiving of governmental services. And I won't read the rest of this paragraph because it's not relevant. So here's the question someone asked, and then I'm going to go to the next part.
Yeah.
Phase 1 allows for outdoor worship of more than 10 people as long as social distancing is still practiced. Would Parkwood consider holding an outdoor service? So if you go down a few steps below this writing about mass gathering, which seems to say a church could gather.
Right. Go for it. Yeah.
But then it says, quote, any gatherings more than 10 people that are allowed under subsection 6A, which I read, shall take place outdoors unless impossible. Now, folks, we're not interpreting that on our own. We're getting help. What does that mean? Is it reasonable for us to meet outdoors? So we're not discounting it at this moment, but we're not saying that we will or what we're going to go forward with. So we are taking everything into consideration. We want to be, as I said Sunday, as cooperative as possible.
Right. And the possible outdoor meeting would certainly require maybe even more cooperation, just thinking through all the variables under a tent or however it might be.
Yeah.
And so I do think that would be key moving forward, just cooperation and continuing to pray for your church leadership. The question keeps being asked on the live feeds, Pastor Jeff. Just to review, there's questions obviously about masks. Do we really need to wear them? But the questions are pertaining to kids. Do kids need to wear masks?
Yes. But, and this is an item I didn't raise a minute ago, so we'll go ahead and talk about this. Kids do need to wear masks, but kids under 2, they don't fit. So parents, growth groups, grandparents, friends, people you're fellowshipping with, you're having dinner with, those kind of things. Here's what I really suggest. This will lower our numbers. It'll answer questions about kids in worship, and it certainly will answer the mask question.
Right.
If you could help each other, so I don't have preschoolers anymore, but we could do it. You bring Zane to our house, we let you come to worship.
Sure.
And if I had little kids, then you keep my little kids, and I go to worship at a different time.
Right.
Please consider this. This will help us in lots of ways, And one of the big ways is numbers, but it also answers this question of what we do with a small child.
Right, right, absolutely. Pastor Jeff, you picked up a book a few days ago, and you read it quite a few years ago. You recommended it to many people. You referenced it a Monday night in a meeting, and I never heard you talk about it, and so I asked about it afterwards. And the book is, so what's the book?
Yeah. So this book is called When a Nation Forgets God. It's by Erwin Lutzer. So Erwin Lutzer was the pastor of Moody Church in Chicago for 36 years. He's the pastor emeritus. He's still living. He's still practicing a preaching and teaching ministry. He's written several books. So I sent it home with you, and you read my highlights. He wrote this in 2010. What'd you think about it?
Yeah, so, man, there was a lot more to take in than I could. I had some schoolwork to do on the side as well, so I ordered my own so that I could have some more time with it. But I think it's a historically grounded warning to the church. So when a nation forgets God, he's building his argument off history from Nazi Germany.
Right.
But I think he's not saying that America is falling into Nazism. But he's saying that we've got a lot to learn from this history. And so there's a lot of profound quotes. But Jeff, you're the one that's really read it thoroughly. Yes. So why did he write this book?
So the subtitle is 7 Lessons We Must Learn from Nazi Germany. So I'm going to stress what you just said. He's not saying America's Nazi Germany. So he wrote this in 2010. He says in this book that there's some trajectories that happened in Nazi Germany that America better wake up and think about as it relates to the church, the Christians. We Christians ought to think about these things.
Right.
Not that we're moving toward Nazism. I want to say this 40 times. That's not the argument of this book. So he tells you why he writes it right here. This forces us, that's Christians, to grapple with the conflict between our allegiance to government and our greater allegiance to God. Mm. Our allegiance to government, which he's not discounting, we have it.
Right.
But our greater allegiance to God. So forcing us to ask those kinds of questions. He says the church has always been poised between two gods and two crosses. On the one side is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who died on a Roman cross, executed for the sins of the world. On the other side are the number of lesser gods and other crosses that promise a salvation. These other gods are almost always embodied in the state. They most often come to be dressed in the garb of Caesar, and in the end, they are committed to crushing religious freedom.
Wow, those are stark words.
Serious words.
Yeah.
He later says, we dare not give to Caesar that which is God's. Mm. He's working off Jesus' statement, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but we dare not give to Caesar that which is God's.
Right. So thinking through that statement, I think that's very agreeable to the Christian ear at first thought. But what does he say a few pages earlier that leads to that statement?
He says, and this this book had helped me think, and I'd forgotten until Monday that I'd worked through this. He says we need to develop a theology of civil disobedience. Mm-hmm. That is, we need to think through this question. When do we tolerate the curtailment of our freedoms, and at what point should we speak and act? So I've spoken, I've been clear.
Right.
So when should we speak and when should we act?
Man, again, it's a lot to think about. So how does Lutzer flesh out not giving to Caesar that which is God's?
So I'm going to be careful with how people hear the application
Sure.
of what he says here. He says believers cannot choose to remain silent under the guise of preaching the gospel. Sharing the gospel is, of course, our primary responsibility, since it is the only cross of Christ that can transform the human heart. But once we, that is the Christian, have received the gift of salvation through Christ, we must not, I shouldn't have said not. We must live out the implications of the cross in every area of our life. We must be prepared to submit to the lordship of Christ in all spheres, that is, of life.
Well, and you made a similar statement on Sunday in your message that that everything we do, even the assembly, the word that Jesus uses, ecclesia, it's a political word. It has to do with our allegiances,
Right.
And so this is very much in agreement with this, just this area, this thought life that we're in right now. So Jeff, we've received this question informally, formally. What's the big deal? This governmental, the government saying, "Hold on, just wait." Is this temporary, right? So what's the deal?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer for a quote in just a moment, but I'm gonna say that the big deal is how subtle this is taking place, how subtly this got here. So I've asked myself several questions. Would this have happened this way 100 years ago? People say, well, there was a pandemic in 1918. Well, it didn't happen this way.
Right, very different.
It didn't go on like it's going on now, in terms of how freedoms have been dealt with. And then I've asked this question: would our founding fathers, what would they have thought about this? So this is a quote from Benjamin Franklin.
Okay,
who was a deist, but he did believe in God, right? But he was a deist, so he was not a biblical Christian.
Right.
Here's what he said: any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. That is a sobering quote that we need to think about, and we need to think about it from people who had lost their liberties and gained their liberty through the founding of our nation.
Right. So we've already read maybe 5 quotes already, and so brothers and sisters, if you're watching, I don't know if we've said this clearly enough. This is really a book that you should have and that you should be reading through. Yeah. He goes on to say on page 65 that when God is separated from our government, we're forced to accept arbitrary laws, and then we have to answer the question that who is lawgiver, and he provides that it's God, it's not man. Right. He says either God is supreme or the state is supreme.
Yes.
And so then he comes to a conclusion about laws and our obedience. So what's that conclusion that he comes to?
Yes. We must not permit the lawmakers or the courts of America to discourage us from doing what we must, representing Christ in our personal and corporate witness. So that's what he says we must.
Right.
We must represent Christ in our personal and corporate witness. As our freedoms are curtailed, our witness becomes more focused, more challenging. Let us be obedient to a higher law, the law as given to us by the Supreme Court of the universe. Him alone we obey, him alone we worship, solo Deo Gloria.
Amen.
Now, representing Christ in our personal and corporate witness. Now, brothers and sisters, this is why this is so complicated. There's this subtlety going on with our First Amendment rights.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which have to do with our obedience to God. So we don't worship because we've been given the right, but our founders recognized that right and not to curtail it, right? So we've got to say in this situation, is it right to allow that for a period of time, and, which I think if death and the spread of this disease is there, then it is right.
Sure.
If it's staring us down. But then reasonably, how long do you wait for that? Because one of the things he'll point out in this book, that what happened is the church just idly sat back and kept letting it happen and letting it happen. It'd go a little bit further and come back, but it never went back to where it was. It'd go a little bit further and come back, and then before they knew it, their freedoms were gone.
Yeah, and there's personal stories, anecdotes of those very things in this book. So again, brothers and sisters,
Yep.
we would strongly recommend it. So a lot of questions are flowing in. So
Good deal.
The first one, Pastor Jeff, will families be allowed into worship if they don't feel comfortable wearing masks, having their temperature taken?
Yeah, please don't put us in that discussion when you get here. We are asking you to wear a mask and have your temperature taken.
Yeah.
You're going to make if you come and refuse that, you're going to make everybody uncomfortable. You're going to make everything difficult. And if you came in and brought it, even though you think you don't have it, and you're going to have 50 reasons why you shouldn't, if you came in and spread it, we are all a part of you now.
Right. The ramifications could be huge.
So we're asking people to do this together.
And this is for the foreseeable future. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we're not going to do this in an unreasonable amount of time.
Right.
There's going to be tremendous scrutiny on the church gathering. Everybody needs to be. You got to be ready for that. Tremendous scrutiny.
Right. Pastor Jeff, another question is: when will the children be allowed to attend Sunday school or their growth groups again?
We don't have an answer to that question. Our focus is on the gathering. That is a complicated question, and there's a lot of things involved with that, and there's not a plan in place yet.
Mm-hmm. Brother, the next question is: when the new capacity for the service is reached, will everyone else be turned away? How will that work? Will we be notified that we have a seat before we arrive? We walked through registrations briefly, but how would something like this come?
You're not going to be assigned a seat. You'll know you have a place to sit.
Right.
If you register, you're given a registration for that service. You have it. Folks, this isn't perfect. I despise that we would have to do something like this, but we have to be prudent.
Sure.
And I will not lightly turn anybody away. So you come, Jacob, you haven't registered. That service is full. We're going to tell you to wait. Let's get the service filled up, and we'll do everything we can to get you inside. And that will not regularly happen, that we won't add more services or figure out another way to handle things.
Yeah. Brother, there's another question, this time about infants. What does it look like if they start making noise in the service? Do we need to go to the lobby? Do we just need to do our best to quiet them? What do we do?
Yep.
We've all been there.
Yeah, y'all been there. So because kids in the service is going to require something different from me, I will be very upfront at the beginning of the service. Please, if you think your child's being disruptive, please go to the lobby with the child. And I'm going to say this now, that if the service becomes disruptive, that I can't concentrate, then I'm going to have to say, brothers and sisters, I can't concentrate. We're going to have to do something with the children. But I come back to, if you guys will help each other,
right,
this won't be a big issue.
For sure. Hey, we've got one. People apparently appreciate what we do tonight. We've heard a lot of great, kind comments.
Right.
But the question is, do you plan to continue doing live with Pastor Jeff after we start meeting again?
Yeah.
They say, I hope so, even if it's just once per month.
Right. So we are considering something like once a month. I don't want to commit to it yet. We see the value of this. It's very valuable on a couple levels. You can ask me questions. You get to ask what you want, and we'll try to be as forthright. I like the lighthearted side. I'm sorry tonight's a whole lot more serious than it has been. I like using a lot of humor and laughter with it. So I want that part. I think what we are going to do though is there will be a recorded podcast regularly.
Yeah.
That's going to be interactive like this and bring people in, but a live Q&A with the congregation less frequently than the recorded
weekly.
Podcast.
Sure.
So that's what we're talking about right now. But I can't think about any of that right now. I'm just trying to come up with when we're going to gather.
That's right. First things first, right? A question that we keep getting in, who decides the temperature range? What will it be? People are saying I run a little bit higher than the 98.6.
Right.
So
all right. So
what
the
are
healthcare professionals, we're not a bunch of preachers deciding this. This is healthcare professionals who are involved with this kind of screening on a regular basis, who are a part of this local church. So anything greater than 104, and they will take into account if you have any other symptoms. But anything greater than 104.
Good deal. It's been asked, how can
100.4.
Yeah.
They're typing.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
Now,
should have
that was
got that.
really
104 would be very alarming.
100.4. If you have a fever of 104, get in an ice bucket. So
That's a quote. Someone should tweet that one out. Oh man. Okay, if there's one thing that we were to consistently pray about related to opening up, what would it be?
For the whole church, we want to pray for wisdom. We want to be cautiously courageous.
Mm.
We don't want to be cowards. We also don't want to be cavalier.
Mm.
So I am praying this for myself, and you've heard it in almost every meeting. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. That's what we need to be praying for the leadership of the church, for one another. And I just want to say, brothers and sisters, I'm not trying to seek sympathy here. You need to pray for our stamina.
Mm.
This has taken a tremendous physical and emotional toll. 1,300 of you are very happy. The congregation has been very gracious, but everything's not been positive. And the weight of bringing you together is huge, huge.
Mm.
So you need to pray for one another and pray for your leadership. And know this, we make our decisions with the body of elders, and you need to pray for all of us.
That's right. That's right. This wasn't planned or scripted, but you shared it in a meeting at some point. I think it was last week. The picture from Gideon and his army about the cautiously courageous. Could you just briefly share that idea, that picture? Do you remember it?
Maybe? I do.
Okay.
I do. I remember. So remember when Gideon chose his army, he first said, "If you want to go home, go home." So he let those who were afraid or weren't interested or didn't believe in what they were doing, they went home. Came to the river, told them to drink water. The cavaliers stuck their head in the water, drank with it like a dog. They lapped out of the water. They weren't paying attention. The people that went with him were the ones that reached down with their hands and brought the water up to their mouth so they could watch and look and see. And that's what we got to do. We got to be cautious yet courageous going forward.
Yeah. I just think that's such a helpful image to think. May we be people who are sitting there like this.
Yes.
Okay. One last question in this segment is: could the porch be used with a video screen to accommodate more worshipers? What are your thoughts on that approach?
I would say we're doing online worship. I think you'd be better off to stay home and watch a video of the service or gather with a small group to do that. I'm not for starting a video venue that way. I just, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, we could. I think we're going as far with video worship that I want to go by providing it at home.
Sure. Well, Jeff, do you have any concluding thoughts, particularly as it relates to Sunday, the sermon text that's coming up, 2 Corinthians 1, verses 12 through 24?
Yeah. So I love it. I just love how the Lord lets you live something when you're preaching it. So Paul says, because I was sure of this, I wanted to come to you first so that you might have a second experience of grace. I wanted to visit you on my way to Macedonia and come back to you from Macedonia and have you send me on my way to Judea. Was I vacillating when I wanted to do this? Do I make my plans according to the flesh, ready to say yes, yes, and no, no at the same time? All right, brothers and sisters, I know this temptation because I've felt the pressure in myself sometimes over the last couple of weeks of, all right, we got to make decisions. We got to go. People are going to think we're. Paul says, I'm not vacillating. I wasn't trying to be yes, yes, and no, no. I'm not trying to be confusing to you. I'm trying to do what the Lord would have us to do. And then he concludes with this statement that all the promises of God find their yes in Christ. So here's what Paul's saying. If you want to think I'm wishy-washy and vacillating, look at the gospel I preach to you. Does that communicate to you I'm a vacillating person? So, excuse me. Be careful, brothers and sisters, with everybody in leadership. So I might disagree with some of the things that have transpired in our state or in our government. But I have not spoken disparagingly of those people, and I have prayed for them regularly because I don't want their job. Mine's more than I can handle.
Yeah, yeah.
And just remember this. If you were sitting in the table making those decisions, if it was with you, I'll use this illustration. So Ned had been on vacation. So I was a youth pastor here. Ned was pastor. He'd go on vacation a week or two. I get to preach. You know, I was virtual pastor.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
He'd come back. I was back to youth pastor. I was sitting. This is actually the room that used to be my office where we're sitting right now. I was sitting about right here. I was sitting at the desk. It'd been a month I'd been a pastor. And I'm sitting here one day and I went, Ned's not coming back. There's a lot of weight.
You feel the weight.
There's a lot of weight that goes with leadership. So pray for us as we go forward, as I've already appealed. The book, I see the question.
Yeah.
When a Nation Forgets God, Erwin Lutzer. Erwin Lutzer. If you miss that, we'll post that out there. Highly recommend it for you. And somebody asked also a question here about commentaries. What are the two commentaries you recommend?
The two commentaries we'd recommend for teachers or anyone in the church for 2 Corinthians would be the commentary on 2 Corinthians by the author's last name is Cruse. That's Kruse, Cruse, and that'll look green and white if you see it. And then David Garland is the other author of the other commentary that we'd recommend, Garland, and that's in the NAC, the New American Commentary series. So that's a red cover. So look for a green one with Cruse, spelled with a K, and then a red one with Garland. Both of those are very helpful, accessible. Well, brother, we're receiving word that there's a lot of people saying thank you, and thank you to the church. We've received many emails, many letters saying thank you. And so, brother, I've got the particular privilege to work alongside you. But as you mentioned, I've seen the days off, the time away come and go on your calendar, and it's not taken because of this. And so, brother, thank you for your service to the church. Thank you for the elders. So, brother.
Amen. Thank you, Parkwood. I said it Sunday. I love you. And thanks for joining.
Amen.